So, on today's podcast, we're talking about TGIF, truly, genuine, impactful feedback. What does truly genuine, impactful feedback look like in mindset, in action, and behavior? And how can we share it with those around us in order to help us shape the culture we want together? Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome in. So glad you are here. We are at over 200 episodes. So many great things out there. I've been love the feedback that we're getting. Great thought leaders that have joined me, great individual topics, and my hope is if you're back listening that you are one of the OGs that have been with us from the beginning, which means this continues to add value to your life and your work. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome in. So much great stuff. I hope you'll go back and listen to some old episodes. And my commitment to every time we come together is that my hope is that this is a place for you to step back, to think, and hopefully to have some good oxygen breathed into you, so that whatever you're thinking about in your life and your work, you're able to think about the person you're hoping to be, the temperature you're hoping to set in your life, but also in your work and the culture that you're trying to create with the people around you. So glad you're here. Before we dive into today's episode, if you will do me the quick favor, rate the podcast 5 stars. That is so important for whatever platform you're on. Rate the podcast 5 stars. Leave an authentic review in your own voice, your own words. Authenticity is key. And then certainly, if you're willing to share the podcast with colleagues, team members, share it on social media, whatever's authentic for you, that's the way that these messages spread, are amplified, and reach more people. So thanks to everybody that takes a moment to do such a thing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Giving genuine feedback is tough. Giving genuine feedback is tough. We know this. We all have habits, as we've talked about in past episodes, and we also have habits as it relates to feedback and how difficult it is at times to give genuine and impactful feedback. In fact, the habits that we form, again, the habits of giving feedback or avoiding it, the habits we form, the habits we practice, that we grow or we develop, shape how we operate in the world. And habits are powerful because they help shape our experience. And again, in past episodes, we've talked about this idea of habits and in culture shaping and what we allow lingers and what we teach triggers. And also we've talked about it as it relates to conflict and discomfort and how we navigate our way through those things, and the habits that we form either help us grow into healthier relationships or healthier teams, or wither and become unhealthier relationships or unhealthier teams. We all are human, and so we don't typically seek conflict out. But some people get better and flex those muscles and get better about navigating their way through conflict and share then in ways that brings out the best and are able to give more genuine feedback that's actually impactful and helpful. They learn to flex muscles that help them work through the courageous situation or the conflict in healthier ways. And other people tend to run the other direction or hide or pretend that it's not there. And then, as we talked about last episode, what we allow lingers. So that lingers and becomes the culture of the relationship or of the entire team or the entire organization. All of us can be masters at time at avoiding conflict. So we've talked about in the past that, the quote from Mr. Rogers, anything that is human is mentionable. And anything that actually we have the courage to mention can become more manageable. And when we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scaring. But we got to be willing to mention it so that it becomes more manageable. So I love this idea. I've done a whole podcast, of course, on this idea of mentionable becomes more manageable. But we've got to be able to deliver, genuine feedback that's impactful for the person, that's actually valuable for the person and certainly for all involved. So on today's podcast, we're talking about TGIF, truly genuine, impactful feedback. What does truly genuine, impactful feedback look like in mindset, in action, and behavior? And how can we share it with those around us in order to help us shape the culture we want together? But before we dive into today's topic, let's pause, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Hey everyone, I want to take a quick minute just to remind you about one of my favorite days of the year that is coming up on Friday, November 3rd, 2023, for Thermostat Cultures Live. This is a powerful day of development that I host and an opportunity for us all to step back, take a deep breath, and calibrate our thermostats for the road ahead in our own leadership roles, our lives, and certainly with the cultures that we are creating. This year, it's a hybrid event, and there are limited seats available for the in-person VIP experience in Columbus, Ohio. That's right, it's a really cool in-person VIP experience in Columbus, Ohio, as well as there are online virtual seats available for those who want to engage from a remote location. As always, I'll be joined by amazing thought leaders from around the globe, and it will be a day you won't want to miss. So visit thermostatcultureslive.com, thermostatcultureslive.com to learn more and to reserve your seat or seats for your entire team. So we've been talking about on previous podcasts about how conflict and courageous conversations and being able to make things mentionable to become more manageable, all of this dealing with conflict and having courage and discomfort are a part of life. And yet how we navigate our way through those situations is what helps us grow in healthy ways or wither or unhealthy ways in our relationships, on our teams, throughout our organizations. And we're all human. Certainly, you hear me say this over and over again on this podcast. I am not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, nor is any team or organization. There's no perfect ones out there. But the ones that get stronger, strengthen and their ability and practice being able to navigate their way through challenging things, build a level of resilience, and become then able to accomplish more difficult things. They learn to flex those muscles that help them work through conflict in healthier ways. And again, others then, what they work on or they establish or they allow to linger is the avoidance, is the running the other direction, the hiding or the pretending it's not there. And so, learning to be able to navigate our way through challenges and conflict and having the courage to have conversations when they're needed helps us build our level of resiliency to handle tough situations and be honest about tough things that we're dealing with so that we can get a game plan to move forward. So giving feedback to someone or a part of a team or having courageous conversations, we know can be uncomfortable. Yet we also know, as we talked about on last week's episode, what we allow lingers. So if we avoid the conflict, if we don't give the necessary feedback, if we aren't in the habit of having courageous conversations, then that becomes the culture, a culture of avoidance and where the things we need to talk about just stay under the surface or get swept under the rug. Now, this all sounds easy enough to just say, well, if you have something you need to talk about, just talk about it. But we know that we get in, when you get into the heat of the moment or a truly conversation, courageous conversation is needed and arises, it's hard to lead that conversation well. And so in past episodes, I've also talked about the fundamentals of how to have that good conversation. So, we'll build off that today because today we're talking about what I refer to as reminders to ourselves for how to give truly genuine, impactful feedback, TGIF. First, let's make sure we're on the same page with this title. The first important distinction is that the feedback has to be genuine. It has to be genuine, meaning the feedback or topic we're going to share needs to be authentic and sincere, and not just what someone else thinks we ought to be telling them. It's got to be authentic and sincere and genuine and a care for the person, actually. And so genuine is authenticity. It's sincere, and we're not giving the feedback just because somebody said we have to or because we're also trying to hurt the person. We're doing it because we want to help and give authentic feedback that's going to help them. The second part of it is needs to be impactful, meaning it's going to be valuable to both parties. Giving somebody feedback that really doesn't help them, or feedback that it's hard for them to do anything with, or, it's hard for them to really change any behavior, or it's just like, hey, that wasn't good, isn't really impactful feedback. And so it needs, the impactful part of it is, the meaning is that it's got to be valuable to both parties, meaning it's going to help us in this relationship or this team stimulate progress. So it's not about just pointing the finger or throwing darts or blaming someone else or just pointing out that they did something wrong. It's about, okay, how can it be impactful, meaning what might we do differently, and how can we learn from this in this relationship or this team or this situation so that we can create new patterns and not do the same thing over and over again. So it needs to be genuine, authentic, and sincere, and impactful, meaning it's valuable to all parties involved. And yet still we know that it's not easy. It's not easy. And so here are a couple things I try to remind myself of when I go into a courageous conversation in order to give truly genuine, impactful feedback. I remind myself a couple of things. One, I remind myself to honor the human element. First thing I remind myself is going into giving truly genuine, impactful feedback is I need to remind myself to honor the human element. Before I even enter the conversation, I need to take time to remember that there is another human being on the other side of this exchange. I often take a deep breath. I remind myself of the purpose of this encounter is out of care for them and care for the situation. And I'm there to honor them as a person, not point the finger and blame, but honor the situation. But we're also coming together to help stimulate progress, not just to point out what didn't work, but to help teach something for the future. And so I remind myself to take a deep breath, remember the purpose of the conversation, honor the human element in front of me, and that I'm going in to care for the person and also to stimulate progress. Secondly, I enter it out of a spirit of genuine appreciation. Even though there's something courageous that we need to talk about and there's some feedback that we need to give, I also try to remind myself to go into that dialogue out of genuine appreciation, which means I want to make sure that before we even get to the feedback, I want to identify elements about them as a person, their gifts, their skills, their work, who they are as a person. What is it that I genuinely appreciate and know they bring value to our relationship, to the world, to our team, to our organization? And I'm not just making it up. I search myself to come up with what is a genuine appreciation. And I need to acknowledge that what I see in them, what I appreciate about them, their skills, the value they bring to the relationship, to the world, to the team, to the organization. And if I can't identify anything, then there's probably a different conversation that's needed. That if this is a person I'm in relationship with or is on my team or part of the organization, if I can't identify anything that I appreciate, then there's probably a different conversation we need to be having. So what is that genuine appreciation? The third thing I try to do is to make sure that I'm providing a clear observation of the feedback for dialogue. A clear observation of the feedback for dialogue. So as Brene Brown reminds us, clear is kind. Clear is kind. So what is the feedback we truly need to have dialogue about? What did I observe and why it is, kind, to use Brene Brown's words, or important to share it with them, and why, it's important for the future culture of our relationship or our team or our performance. If I can't articulate it clearly, then I'm probably not ready to have the conversation. So I got to be able to clearly be able to say, this is what I observed, this is what I experienced, and I need to make sure that I'm able to say, this is why it's important for them individually or us and the future culture of our relationship, our team, our performance. The fourth element of this that has to come right after that clear observation is to remind myself and to model for them that this is a two-way street. This isn't just me talking at them. This is us having a dialogue together. So to listen and create space to see how they view it from their angle, to allow some time and space to say, that's how I observed it and how I experienced. What did you see? How do you think about it? Impactful feedback isn't just about what I see, but is also about listening and understanding and how they might have experienced a situation differently than I, and then us together identifying in a two-way street, identifying solutions for the future that could stimulate future progress. So we have to model and create that kind of two-way street. And lastly, before I get out of the conversation, I know that we need to identify next steps. So in every courageous conversation, it's so important to lastly, before you exit the conversation, I have to remind myself, I want to make sure we have identified our next steps or our commitments to each other or what is happening next to help move us forward. So what commitments are we making to each other so we don't repeat this pattern? What requests do we have of each other so that, again, we can build new habits of the way we're going to handle this in the future? Who is doing what next? This is what I said I'm going to do. This is what you said you're going to do. And then when are we going to circle back to just touch base with each other and to make sure that everything continues to progress? Oftentimes, not everything is solved in one conversation. So when are we going to do that next? Again, last time we were together, we talked about what we allow lingers and what we teach triggers. So what new habit or behavior or practice are we going to teach to trigger a new and positive chain reaction? Truly genuine, impactful feedback begins with the mindset that I've talked about in many past episodes of seeking to understand before my need to be understood. It sounds easy, but of course we know it's harder in the heat of the moment. But these reminders help me develop this mindset and then helps us seek out the people and situations that we know we truly want to move forward with or we need to move forward with. So truly genuine, impactful feedback begins with this mindset and then the courage to come to that dialogue out of this spirit. So let me leave you with a few questions to ponder for today. What truly genuine, impactful feedback would be helpful for you in your important relationships or your team to have dialogue about? What are the truly genuine, impactful feedback that needs to be happening in your life or your work? In what ways could you practice cultivating this mindset of truly impactful and genuine, truly genuine and impactful feedback? What ways could you practice and cultivate this mindset? So I hope today's episode got you thinking in many ways. If a deeper dive into any of these topics would be helpful to you, you can shoot us an email, info@jasonvbarger.com, info@jasonvbarger.com, and let us know. We'll continue to design content to help meet you where you are and hopefully contribute to your life and your work. Lastly, I hope you'll go back, listen to old episodes, search topics, check out interviews I've done with other thought leaders and conversations as a part of this. There's so many great episodes in the past that will contribute to your life and work, and I hope you'll go back, check them out, and share them, rate them, review them, all those things to help amplify the message further in the world. So cheers to you, cheers to all of us for the path ahead, and remember that the future of leadership is you, is me, is us, We have the opportunity to get clear on the temperature that we're hoping to set as individuals, but also as teams and relationships and organizations, and then be courageous to breathe oxygen into those mindsets and actions that will help sustain us on our path forward. Step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.